Well, we begin our tour at the upper level industrial area. There are 4 main industries here, and we'll take you through them one at a time. The first industry here is a steel transloading center. It is based on an actual prototype in Hamilton, Ontario. This is a cardboard mock-up from a previous layout. It will eventually extend to the backdrop wall there. It holds 3 cars per track on 2 tracks, mostly gondolas, coil steel cars, flat cars, and bulkhead cars. The second industry is a printing house where loads of newsprint paper are received. It has a curved warehouse building. Again, this one is based on an actual prototype, although fairly freelanced, based on Google photos from Providence, Rhode Island. Some interesting photos that I just happened to come by. The third industry here is a manufacturing plant taking in plastic pellets and shipping out barrels, so they're in large 86-foot or 60-foot boxcars going outbound. This is a kit bash of 2 Walters Magic Pan Bakeries kits, so you get quite a large footprint when you put the 2 buildings, all the parts together. Rather than 2 small buildings, you get one fairly good-sized industry. The next one here is also a Walters kit, but modified to change the footprint to fit the curve of the layout and the space available. It receives building supplies. It's mostly made from the Peterson tool and die kit. And we'll go to the back and you can see the back side of it here. These last 2 kits have been painted up and decals applied, so they're close to being finished. There's no weathering yet. They're close to being done. Here we have another view of the printing house. You can see the curve of the loading dock, much more in this angle. And you can see it's quite a large building. It is mostly made up of gator board for the basic shape, covered with several packages of Walters basic brick sheets. So it was fairly inexpensive to build, although getting all the mortar lines in was a bit of a challenge. Sitting in front of the printing house is the Quebec and New England offices, shops, servicing facility for its locomotives in this area. You can see a couple of the recently painted GP38s and several of the yet to be painted units sitting out front. This is basically a combination of the Pike Stuff diesel house and the Pike Stuff car shops kits put together to make a larger facility. Here is an overview of the switching yard that services the industries near the interchange with Conrail. Local industries here include a cereals manufacturing plant. There are 2 tracks here, 1 track crossing the asphalt going into the building, 1 track adjacent to the building next to these various silos here. This kit is a combination of several kits, including the Walters cement silos and the silo and headhouse for the Magic Pan bakeries. Since I had 2 of those kits and I wasn't using the silos from both of them on the plastics plant, I used one here. The main building in the background is made up of the Walters Cornerstone modular parts. I just basically put them together in a form that I thought would be interesting, that gave it a sense of presence and kind of acted as a backdrop as well. So it's basically a half a dozen or so of those kits that you assemble in any way you like to get a building that has enough doors and windows and interesting features that that you're happy with. So it's not based on any particular prototype. And next up, along the backdrop behind the yard, is a general warehouse, finished goods, paper, lumber, that sort of thing. So you'll find mostly box cars, double door, single door box cars at any one of the 3 loading doors. This building is made from the New Line Structures concrete warehouse kit. Here's a sample here. I used this kit, didn't use the front part that you see in the photos, but all the rest of the sides could be used and laid out in any way or shape that you like to get what you see here, for example. So I was very pleased with the way this went together. Very simple kit to build, paint it up very quickly, and you sort of have an instant backdrop / industry. At the west end of the yard, we have another example of a combination of buildings used to form a backdrop as well as to provide switching activity for the area. This is a collection of pike stuff parts that put together to make it look like 3 buildings that were connected together to form an auto parts manufacturing plant, or part of a manufacturing plant that extends beyond the backdrop. The closest building, the one that's 2 stories high, accepts coil steel cars for unloading, and the one behind is where the 60-foot parts cars are shipped out with stampings. The track extends right to the far wall, so the building can hold 5 60-foot cars. The coil car building is long enough to hold 2 cars. This building here is primarily here to act as a backdrop, like so many of the buildings on the layout. It is the Walters Northern Power and Light building, but I have enlarged it by only building 3 sides and using all the parts in the kit to make a longer building. And the neat thing about this particular location is I've modeled it as a building that's no longer receiving rail service. There is a track, as you can see here, in the weeds and rusted over, where they used to receive coal to power the plant. And you can see where there may have been a turnout here at some time in the past, but it's now ripped up, and you see remnants of ties and weeds growing over where the track connection used to be. I will eventually come back and make this building a whole lot more weathered to give it that true sense of disuse over the years. And this is just a shot looking back over the industrial support yard. Give you a sense of how it all ties together from this end. At the very west end of this yard, we see the connection to the interchange tracks that the Conrail trains use to drop off and pick up cars. And they wrap right around. I pull back here, the lake, see there. And then eventually tying into the junction where the Q&NE crosses over the Conrail main. One of the fun little kits I had the pleasure to put together was this exact replica of Alto Tower in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's rather an ingenious kit, and the way it's put together, it allows you to paint different parts, different colors before you assemble it. It's quite detailed and intricate. The only problem I have with it is that it looks too new for something that's based on a prototype that's so old. I'm considering turning it into a museum, perhaps, when I eventually get my CTC signals installed. There won't be any need for a tower such as this. But since it's so interesting, I do want to keep it here at the junction. And I have room for parking, so we can turn it into a form of museum. The last industry we have in the area around the interchange yard is this Abrasives plant, which manufactures various forms of sandpaper. Receives different grades of sand and hoppers placed into the silos and ships out in boxcars finished product. This kit is a collection of 3 different kits, the middle one being standard unmodified Walters cement plant. The building on the right is just a collection of pike stuff parts that are made to look like the one end of a warehouse. And the larger building to the left here, the Walters Red Wing milling kit, which is basically the stock kit but unwrapped to again provide a backdrop / industry, giving it a much larger appearance because we only model 3 sides of the building here, and it neatly dovetails into the corner of the backdrop where it makes a turn, so it really disappears into the tree line, I think, quite nicely. After crossing Conrail's double-track main line, the Quebec and New England line runs roughly parallel to the Conrail line for a short distance, passing through the forested area and across the bridge over the nearby river, making its way down towards the outskirts of the lower industrial area. This first industry, tucked into the backdrop, is a collection of Walters printing plants and tire plant bashed together to give something a little bit different that fills the space that I had available. So 2 tracks, one going into the building and one to the side, receiving hopper cars. This plant is an asphalt shingles plant, so mostly granular materials coming in the hopper cars and outbound shipments, boxcars leaving. The building next to it was a bit of a challenge because it was an outside corner of the backdrop, so I needed something that wrapped around the backdrop to take your eye away from the sharp corner of the wall, since I didn't have rounded walls when I built the basement walls here. But I think it worked out quite well. This is a combination of a couple of backdrop kits from Walters, the furniture kit, backdrop kit, and putting 2 of them together, I was able to wrap it around the wall and giving it rather a large footprint and lengthening the space for the loading dock for the rail cars. You can see an 86-foot car hidden under there, as well as adding some loading docks for tractor trailers at this end. Bit of a challenge keeping the building level. I don't know if you can make it out in the video, but the track, the siding is level, but the ground slopes away at 1%. You can see the main line passing by is higher at this end of the building than at this end of the building. So the building had to be shaped a little bit on the bottom to give it an appropriate foundation. All in all, I think it worked out well. Next to the furniture plant are a collection of buildings that are strictly for backdrop purposes, to give the area a sense of an old industrial place. This first collection of buildings here, it's one large building or 3 buildings tight together, but it's again using the Walters modular kits to produce a rundown looking industrial area. You can see how the mortar lines vary quite a bit as the building has aged over the years. Next to that collection of buildings is the Walters American Hardware kit, which, like the Redwood milling kit we saw before, is simply unwrapped to maximize the length of the backdrop. In this case, all 4 sides are flat against the wall, giving it quite a large feel. You step back here, you can see it's quite a large building when you do it that way. And sitting in front we have the local yard office, switch tower. This is a straight Walters kit, but it fit in here nicely. Moving along, we have another kit that is strictly speaking for visual effect and to hide the fact that we've got a blank wall behind us. This is just a small truck dock. This kit is by Promotex, in case anyone's interested in the manufacture of the kit. Also in this corner of the local yard is a small propane and ammonia distributor. The track is long enough to hold a couple of tank cars. A lot of detail yet to be added to this one. We are now in the lower industrial area, and one of the signature industries here is the very large grain mill. This is an industry that is made from 6 of the Walters ADM milling kits, mostly to get all the silos. I have lots of leftover parts, as you can imagine. The head house is enlarged to use sides and ends. Since I had so many extra parts, it gives it again a much more imposing size rather than a single building that came with the original kit. I think it's befitting of the number of silos that are here. Next we have the steel fabrication plant, which is made up of 3 kits. The first one being the offices, which is the Walters engineering building, again unwrapped to give it a longer footprint along the wall, showing only 3 sides here. Next to it we have an open air section with the heavy-duty crane, where we'd be unloading steel shapes, and we have an inside loading or unloading building next to it. Other than the offices here, everything that you see was put together using parts from the Walters electric furnace kit. It's rather a versatile kit. It doesn't have to be used for what it was originally intended. The corrugated steel sides are very effectively used to produce any kind of building that you want. As you can see here, it I think worked out quite well. Another one of these signature industries in the lower industrial area is this paper plant, which is a favorite of mine because it is basically my attempt at replicating an actual site on a spur line. It's called the Pine Street Spur in Thorold, Ontario. It's no longer receiving rail service, but it was until only a few short years ago. Based on photos and a few plans that I managed to dig up, this is very close to being a scale replica of the plant. The only thing that I did change is I added a second track and truck loading dock to give it some additional rail service. But you can see the loading tracks are higher. They actually go up a significant little grade here to get into the plant, and that's just as on the prototype. And there's a covered area here where there's both covered hoppers and liquids are unloaded. This plant would receive chlorine, caustic soda in tank cars. It would receive clay in tank cars and clay in hopper cars. There are doors for the warehouse on the side. The first track, there were unloading hatches between the rails on the second track, and a lot more details to be added for sure, but I think it really captures the buildings as they once looked only a few short years ago. Next to this building is a refrigerated warehouse for foodstuffs. There are 3 loading docks where refrigerated cars are spotted, and you can see some of the outbound product here is beer. And next to this industry, although there's no buildings associated with it, it is the bulk transloading facility. We have 2 tracks, one track for liquids and tank cars and one track for plastic pellets, where each track holds 3 cars. If I step back here, we'll give you an overview of the entire lower yard. So every operating session, there are between 15 and 20 cars transferred down here from the interchange yard, and these are switched out to the various industries. The refrigerated warehouse is made from the same kit as the warehouse we saw back near the interchange yard, the new line warehouse kits, and again you can build it in any shape that you like. I gave this one a bit of a triangular shape to fit the space available on the layout, and again, easy to paint, bit of a blue stripe for accent, and now all we're missing is some refrigeration units on the roof and we'll be good to go. The paper plant is a collection of mostly pike stuff parts and sheets with a bit of gator board. That black roof there for the first level is simply gator board, and a few leftover sheets from the Walters Bakery plant tucked away in the middle there. Well, basically whatever I could use that gave the industry the same sense of shape and form as the original. Here's a view from the center point of the yard, looking one way, and So to recap, here's one last 360 view of the entire layout. Here's the upper industrial area, and you see to the right the tunnel entrance for the Conrail main line coming out of staging. Off in the distance you can see the interchange yard, the lake at the far end, forest and the river scene across the aisle. In the distance, the tunnels, the other end of the Conrail main line heading back to staging, the beginning of the lower industrial area. And here's the lower industrial yard. And the industry is at the far end. I hope you've enjoyed this brief tour of the Quebec and New England Railroad, and we'll see you again real soon.